Hello, everyone. So excited for you to join us. Welcome to the very first episode of Verifiably Random, an original podcast by Algorand Foundation. My name is Min. I lead ecosystem at Algorand Foundation. I've spent a lot of time in tech, helping platforms grow, launching my own, and now spending all of my time helping startups in our ecosystem reach or hit escape velocity. So I'm excited to introduce to you my fellow co-hosts, starting with our very own John Woods.
Hey, it feels great to be here finally doing a podcast. Hey guys, good to see you. It's John, the CTO at the Algorand Foundation. And of course, you know Min and I already, but we have starting with us very recently, the wonderful Marc van Leberg. Marc, over to you.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. So super excited to be here. I'm Marc van Leberg, and I just joined the foundation as the new CMO, and super excited to be here.
So,
Fantastic.
Marc, let me say there's a lot of buzz about you, but there's also a lot of buzz about one of your companions, Mr. Beastie, or is it Miss Beastie? Can you tell us a little bit about Beastie?
Well, yeah. So it's funny. So during COVID, I decided to buy like an old Airstream, like an old classic Airstream, 40 years old, and it's a motorhome, classic motorhome. And as I was getting ready and for conversations with Stacy about Algorand, I said, okay, let me just experiment with NFDs and stuff like that. And so I got out and got like Beastie.algo as an NFD. And so that was fun to do. So that's Beastie.
So is this like, because they're not that common in Europe where I'm, this is kind of like the shiny spaceship looking American, like 60s, 70s style motorhome thing?
Yeah, it is. I mean, the Airstreams have been around since I think the 30s or something, 30s or 40s. And so they're mostly caravans or trailers. And
Yeah,
the one
those
that
are
I got
really
is a
fancy.
motorhome. So it has a car built in, which has advantages. It also has a disadvantage that, you get stranded along the side of the road more frequently.
Right. So has it been the case that like you've had to do a lot of renovation work on like the engine and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so I have it a couple of years now, and I think we did a lot. I did a lot of renovations on it, both inside and outside. And there's the engine part, of course, which was completely redone. But also the inside, I had it completely redone as well. And I kind of focused on more the technology side. So I made it into like a smart RV, installed home automation and stuff like that. So it was a lot of fun to actually do that.
You mentioned you got Beastie.algo, your
I got
first
Beastie Algo.
NFT.
Yes.
How was that? What was that experience? Tell us a little bit more about that.
So yeah, Beastie deserves its own algo address,
Of
and
course.
so actually it's funny because when you go to beastie.algo.xyz, you actually go to Beastie's kind of web property, and so it was fun to actually set it up and use the Para wallet and get everything kind of set up properly, and so it was super easy to do. So it was fun to do.
You know, the thing that I read on you, so I followed your beastie.algo.xyz. Shout out to NF Domains, who provide the greatest naming service in the industry. I followed that link out to beastie.algo's blog post, and I read that you have installed your own special bar that you call the Beastie Bar inside the motorhome. Can you tell me what kind of whiskeys I can expect to drink when I come to visit it?
Yeah, so the vision was to do like a Mad Men style bar, and so that's what it ends up being. And so so I have all kinds of drinks. So next time you're around in the Bay Area, I'll invite you over, John, and then we can have a drink.
Sounds amazing. And you even have a tracker, right? I think I saw on the website, you've got I can see where Beastie.algo is at any point, right?
Yeah, so I had this, I have this pink router that has like a GPS connection to it, and a GPS antenna on my roof, and then I connected it to Home Assistant, and then from there, I programmed it into the Google Maps API, and so now you can actually see where it is on the website. Just don't look too closely at my GitHub repo, because I'm more of a tinkerer than like a professional programmer, so don't look too closely at it.
I mean, the fact that you have a GitHub repo, that's pretty impressive. What have you been committing recently?
So, uh,
Crime? Okay.
since I joined the foundation, not very much anymore, since my time is really preoccupied with the ecosystem and getting up to speed. Um, but in the past, yeah, I've been like tinkering with it, and like
Nice.
all of the sensors in Beastie are like ESP home based, and so all of my ESP home code is on there.
So I heard you use Google APIs there rather than the
Yeah.
Apple APIs that I would have used. Do you still have a love affair with Google? What was that like? It must have been an incredible experience working out there.
Yeah, so I joined Google in 2007, and I was head of marketing for anything that touches mobile and Android. And it was a really interesting time to join the company because it was 1 year before the first Android phone was launched. Um, and I thought it was super interesting, and so it was very challenging too because iPhone was out there as uh, uh, the big, yes, exactly, like as the predominant smartphone at that point. And so Android came in as this kind of startup coming out of nowhere, and so we had to kind of go out and explain to people what it was and why they should care about an operating system, and also attract developers to the ecosystem, because of course everything really stands or falls with the developer community. And so my main task was really to kind of position Android in the marketplace and actually help build that developer ecosystem, which was a very interesting thing to do. And so I've done that at Google for about 10 years or so, and seen Android grow tremendously, which was a lot of fun to do.
There's a lot of parallels in that, right? Just growing, Android before as a sort of the underdog, open source operating system, and now thinking about Algorand. How did you grow that ecosystem for Android?
Well, I think there's multiple components to it. Part of it is really clear positioning of like how is Android different. Um, that was one key part, and so we really leaned heavily on the openness of Android as opposed to our friends at Apple. We leaned heavily on the idea of choice. That hey, you can pick up any phone, large, small, big, big screen, cheap, expensive. And so we leaned very heavily on the differentiating elements of Android, to position it in the marketplace, and then we worked very closely with the developer ecosystem to actually build apps. We would put developers on a pedestal. The developers who built great apps, we put them on a pedestal to show what success looked like, and so
Mm.
really fostered that developer ecosystem. And part of it was actually turning the Android developers in what we call the Android army, and they would go out and they would defend Android, and they would go out and basically replicate our messages and really be our best ambassadors. And so I think there's a lot of similarities to Algorand and the Algorand community as well, who is also very passionate about Algorand. And so we need to provide them with the tools so they can go out, right, and be our best ambassadors and convince everybody to join the ecosystem. And now, for instance, with the Python launch, it's great because they should go out there. Every one of our community members should go find 5 Python developers to go download AlgoKit, and so that'll quintuple the size of our community. And so turning the Algorand ecosystem into a very vibrant ecosystem that becomes our best supporters is I think a key component of success.
Yeah, I think it's the parallels are really interesting because I too feel that like those evangelists that are out there driving the message home for you, spreading awareness and spreading adoption are so critical. And I think as well, just you mentioned Python, of course. Very recently, we launched support for Python on Algorand, bringing the ability to express your smart contracts or write your smart contracts in regular, semantically normal, syntactically normal Python. And so this is an industry first to be able to write your apps for a blockchain using one of the most popular languages in the world And also, because we didn't deviate from regular Python, and instead we kept that syntactically, semantically normal Python that is used in other places, you can use existing Python tooling and indeed existing Python libraries where they make sense inside an Algorand smart contract. So very excited about that launch. And I think the focus on devs is really important. And I think
it's actually one of the things that attracted me to Algorand as well, is that there is a lot of like product excellence and product innovation that is happening, that really tries to kind of like move the blockchain industry forward in very innovative ways. And so I think we're at the leading edge of that. And so I think turning blockchain into kind of a mainstream type of technology requires us to go find the developers where they are. That's what I believe. And so, there's no point in like trying to convince everybody to develop for esoteric languages. We should meet them where they are. And so there's tens of millions of Python developers. Let's go find them and let's give them the tools so they can actually develop on blockchain technology. So I think it's one of the super, super interesting and attractive innovations that Algorand Foundation has been bringing to market. So it's great.
Right. And one final parallel that I would just draw when we're in this conversation, but between your time at Google with Android and say your time now with Algorand Foundation building out marketing for Algorand, is that developers chose Android as a platform to build because it was enabling, right? It enabled new classes of application because they were writing apps for a mobile device. So they had GPS, they had accelerometers, they had a touchscreen display, they had new interfaces that they didn't have on a desktop computer, and they could build apps that weren't possible on a desktop computer. And so the same is true. The same is true of Algorand as a platform, because sure, it's not suitable for all apps, but there's certain types of apps you can build on a blockchain like Algorand that are just not possible on a mobile device and are just not possible on a regular desktop computer. And I think that's an interesting parallel.
Yeah, and I love that about what we do, is that I think we have real use cases and real companies like the Lofties of this world that develop, that, to your point, John, that develop apps that you couldn't possibly develop without a blockchain. And I think that makes it super interesting and useful, and definitely worthwhile for Python developers to kind of add this type of technology as a new tool in their tool belt.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same, like the nature of what you're talking about in terms of like giving developers choice to build and to use the tech for what it is meant to be used for, I think really kind of applies to our ecosystem and all the projects that we're seeing in our ecosystem as well. Like they come here because the tech really satisfies what they want to be building. You know what I mean? I think that's just a lovely story. And by the way, this army that you talk about, we have it. As you know, as you've seen this army of comments that have come in from your questions on X, like, and if we can activate and get them to kind of fight for us in the same way that you were talking about, I think it'd be a pretty powerful force for anybody to reckon with, for sure.
Min, by the way, what's your blockchain origin story? Like, when did you first mess around with crypto?
Oh, that's a good question. So back in, I think not as early as you, John, I'd say, but it was back in 2017. I was working in this co-working space in San Francisco. I was doing my own startup, but like literally a table to the left, it was that project. I don't know if you know Origin, which is Origin is like a marketplace on blockchain. And then to the left, to the right of me, it was like this Chinese guy that was launching a token built off of Quantum, which is like the Chinese Ethereum.
Okay.
And I was like, we need to get in. And so we just, that was our first, like, just full on into the hype of blockchain. And then I joined this exchange called blockchain.com as part of an acquisition from the startup that I did. And that was my first professional foray into blockchain crypto. And I haven't left. So how about you? What was yours?
I mean, mine's boring. One of my buddies was like, run a Bitcoin node. He gave me some Bitcoin. Then later I stressed about finding the Bitcoin and I found them, and then I lost them in Mt. Gox.
And what year was that you started?
Maybe 2011, 2012-ish. I mean,
nice.
yeah. So yeah, it's...
So I'm definitely the youngster here.
But then I hibernated, right? I didn't do very much until like pretty much 2015, 2016, around when you were getting into it, Min, because it was a little bit
Yeah.
boring for those few years. Mark, how about you?
Yeah.
So I'm clearly the more junior member here. So I had my first experience with blockchain really going to the first kind of blockchain conference in San Francisco in 2018, and I thought it was very fascinating. I was sitting in this big room. There was like hundreds of people, and most of the speakers were basically professors talking about cryptography and talking about the different type of methods that they would use to solve big problems with blockchain, such as scaling. Everybody was talking about sharding, the beginning of sharding, and scaling beyond one transaction per second. And so that was, to me, that caught me the bug. At the same time, I also realized, well, wow, it has ways to go here before this can really hit mass adoption. But my interest was definitely peaked, and I've been following this space very closely ever since. And I have to admit, like that first couple of meetings that I had there, I didn't understand like 10% of what they were talking about. And so hopefully I understand a little bit more now. And, as I get up to speed here, I'll understand hopefully more and more.
I'd say that's one
it
of the
definitely piqued my interest. And so since then, I've been following this space closely. I've invested in a blockchain startup and venture fund, and so I've been keeping a close eye on the space since then.
I think what you said about like a lot of these words that you don't understand, I think that's actually one of our biggest challenges as an industry in general, that we have a lot of insider language that is hard to reach other people who are not in it. And, and this is, this is marketing, this is all
it is
helping us. Yeah.
It's that, and it's user experience too, right? Like if you look at all of the wallets, and like they're all similar in that regard. It's like the underlying technology still comes through, right? And so until we are able to completely abstract the complexities of blockchain and make it completely easy for users to understand, how you create an account and how you manage that and do all the things you want to do, and turn that discovery into like an app store or a Google Play Store, right? I think that's the direction that I think we have to go as an industry, to make it, to abstract away all the complexities of blockchain, so users don't need to know about all these details.
Right. I think it's one thing making it easier for developers with things like AlgoKit 2, languages like Python, because they're still technical people and they still have a natural ability with technical things. And so, yeah, you need to make it simple, but you don't need to, give them really, really, guided rails for everything. Whereas a normal user who's not an engineer, who wants to enjoy the benefits of crypto, the self-sovereignty, the decentralization, etc., but maybe doesn't recognize the responsibility that comes with that, as you mentioned, things around minding your keys or
Right.
safeguarding your crypto assets. These are things that I think we have to do better at as an industry. And there's, I think, good initiatives out there like DREC and other things that are trying to fix this. But I think it's definitely a challenge for sure.
And I think in a way, I kind of compare where we are to where we used to be, a couple of months, let's say, before the launch of iPhone. It's like, because all the pieces are there, like all the technology components are there, the infrastructure is there. Like with a blockchain like Algorand, the scalability is there, the security is there, like all the features that you need to build something at scale are there. It's just a matter of like, can we put the pieces together in such a way that you get to mass adoption with the right use case, the right packaging, the right user experience? It's all there. And so it's up to the developers to try and take advantage of all the core components that are there, and then launch services that are really attractive to users. And you start seeing some of that traction, right? Like as I mentioned, Lofty, but there's many others. Look at HisaPay. Look at, like, there's so many projects out there that are starting to kind of break through that technological barrier and get to user adoption. And it feels to me that we're at that point, that kind of like iPhone moment, where we can put the pieces together and just go.
Right. And so maybe now let me transition to my favorite part of the show. It's time for the listener ledger, where we unmute the immutable input of our Algorand community and read some of your questions here on Verifiably Random. Okay. Who wants
Nicely
to go?
put, John. Nicely put.
my Showtime voice. All right.
You should
Controversial
join marketing. You should join the marketing team.
Wow, being recruited already.
Okay, so I'll pick one. I'll pick one first for Min. Why don't you pick one for Marc first?
Yeah. Let's go through it. Because I think Marc opened the door for our community members to drop questions in. Let's see. Well, the first one I think right here is good. Algofund.algo. That's pretty fun. Congrats. What does your first 100 days look like? Marc, this is putting you on the spot.
So
if you could, Marc, if you could please go day by day, that'd be great.
We got time.
So let me start with like a gigantic disclaimer, and it's actually a disclaimer for all of the questions that are being asked, like specifically to me. It's like I'm less than 10 days in to this adventure, and so I'm not going to have a lot of answers, and there's a lot for me to kind of learn, and so the only thing I'm going to basically tell you is kind of give you my first impressions from being here for 10 days. So that's the important thing to kind of realize. And so, what my 100 days look like? Well, I mean, the first thing I mentioned already, I think it's listen and learn, right? There's so much stuff going on. Like I'm acting like a sponge. I'm like listening to a lot of people. I'm talking to a lot of people. I want to talk to a lot of the developers, a lot of the developers out there. I've been engaging with the community as well. And so the whole idea is like, okay, can give me an idea of like the vibe, what's going on. So listen and learn is really my key number one priority in the very short term. Mm-hmm. I would say a second thing is then I would kind of split things up in like pre-decipher and kind of post-decipher. Decipher feels to me like a really big thing that we're focused on. And so pre-decipher, I think the key thing that I'm going to be focusing on is really the Python launch and like the opening up the funnel for developers. And as John said, to me, this is a really, really big deal for us. And so getting more developers into the ecosystem is critical. And so a lot of the marketing activities is going to be focused on opening up that funnel, getting more developers in, promoting Python on Algorand, getting the bootcamp set up, the hackathons, all leading up to Decipher, where hopefully we'll see a bunch of these Python projects see the light of day. So I think that's a clear focus in the very short term. I think the other thing that we're starting to think about is like, how do we launch node incentivization? That's another really, really big part of the roadmap. I know, John, you're very excited about that. And so we're starting to think about like, how do we position this? How do we message this? How do we get this out? I think it's a really, really big, important launch for the ecosystem. And so that's, I would say, is the second part.
Yeah. I think it's really critical. The consensus incentives technology that we're putting out there, it's again transformative in a different way, of course, because Python on Algorand is transformative for developers. It's transformative for the number of apps we're going to have out there. But consensus incentives is transformative for the decentralization of the network, peer-to-peer, which is so it's a prerequisite, to build up the pathways in the network before we roll out peer-to-peer. But also transformative in terms of the security, because we want the stake to come from everyone. That's the whole point of pure proof of stake. The idea that I say you, the user out there, is the person who is contributing to the stake, not just entities that hold large positions.
Yeah. And then I would say the third thing that I really want to focus on, and there's not going to be a lot of kind of visible actions around this in the short term, is really getting ready to do a broader kind of awareness campaign for Algorand and all the goodness that happens in Algorand in the second half of the year. I mentioned earlier about putting developers on a pedestal. Let's talk about all the good things that are happening, right? And so get more proactive about that. And in order to get there, I mean, there's a number of things that need to happen that are kind of behind the scenes type of work in the next 3 months, which is we have to revamp our website. So we have to kind of refresh our brand. We have to kind of tighten our positioning. So there's a bunch of these things that are happening that the community won't see much about because they're happening behind the scenes, but ultimately they will result in stuff becoming visible after Decipher in the second half of the year.
By the way, developers, if you're out there, Marc's pretending that he loves you more than I do, but I love you the most. So funny. And Min, okay, one for you. Let me pick from the list. Okay.
Oh, we're gonna
Okay.
go around the room, huh? I
Yeah,
thought
yeah, yeah.
let's
You
do it.
get to do one for you get to do one for
Yeah,
me.
yeah. Why not? Yeah.
All right. Okay. So variant 626 at variant 626 says, "Hey, what are the plans to emphasize the ecosystem growth in payments?" And I think they mean payments specifically.
Mm.
Why aren't we competing with Stripe with the infrastructure that we have?
It's a good question. I mean, payments. I think let's just say that like payments is an area that our tech can really shine in, right? The finality, the speed, the transactions per second. It's like we are one of the only chains out there that can really showcase what blockchain can do for payments.
Mhm.
And so, absolutely, we this is one of our areas that we are looking into and supporting and figuring out how we can grow more. I'd say the reality is, though, payments, it's like an old industry. It's super entrenched. You have Visa and MasterCard that's been there for decades, and they're a duopoly, right? You have a lot of regulatory kind of pieces that come into it, where it's just like every single thing you have to work on, you have to get, different jurisdictions, et cetera. So it's complicated. It's complicated. But it is an area, like, I mean, I'd say we have some really amazing projects that are already building in it. So Hisab Pay, Marc already was, in fact, I think when Marc and I first chatted, Hisab Pay was like this, was such an exciting project for Marc to get to know. We had NeoMoon in Latin America. We have projects and we have a lot of, support that we want to put towards those projects. In fact, Matt Keller, who runs Impact for us, is running like a payments council, right? So like getting everybody together to figure out how can we help these projects in that space. So there's a lot that we're doing, a little bit like Marc behind the scenes to support these projects. And even Para, we're looking at a pretty cool new functionality for Para. So there's a lot of stuff that we're doing. And it is an area that we're super psyched about. So I'm glad that Variant called this out as one of the areas for us to think about.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Okay.
John, I have a question for you.
Shoot, the science bit. Let's do it.
Quantum. Here, I have it. I'll read it to you. Alan Rodriguez. How can we be sure that Algorand is quantum resistant if there aren't any super quantum computers to actually test Algorand's strength against quantum computing? And I have to tell you, I'm personally very interested in this question because my daughter is studying quantum computing and she's mastering in it. So I don't want her to kind of break the Algorand blockchain. So tell us, John.
Pressure is on. And the thing is, by the way, we should never fear research and progress, from a computer science point of view and from a cryptography point of view, because you have to roll with the punches. You can't try to stop people like your daughter out there progressing the state of the art, because people will always invent new things. And so we have to roll with it. And so this is something I would love to give a lot more time to, but I'll keep it relatively short. Quantum computers are not just theoretical. We have proven that they work. The scale at which they're currently operating, though, is like computers back from the 80s or so. So, in terms of the things that we know they can do, they're still in their infancy. And so, how do they work? Essentially, they exploit exotic physics. So the idea of quantum parallelism or superposition within quantum physics, which is this idea that rather than just being a 1 or a 0 in a normal computer, it's a bit is both a 1 and a 0 at the same time. We call it a qubit.
And I can be in two places at the same time too, right?
Right, exactly. And we should totally explore this deeply. But to answer the question, there's some known algorithms that have been around for a very long time. In some cases that are before the actual implementation of quantum computers. And notably, they're called Shor's algorithm and Grover's algorithm. And they are very specific. So they're knives that cut through very specific materials. And so these algorithms, we know how they work. We know the quantum mechanics that we need to employ in order to run them. And we know the types of mathematical problems they can solve. Okay, so we have these theoretical problems, and we know that we can solve them. And so over here we have modern cryptography, the cryptography we use in cryptocurrencies. It's called elliptic curve cryptography. And it its hardness, the idea that you can't forge a signature, is based on some mathematical functions or mathematical trapdoors. And so we know, and by the way, the name of the trapdoor is called the discrete log problem. And so we simply, from a mathematical point of view, we can prove that if we can have a computer that can run Shor's algorithm, it can solve this discrete log in polynomial time, which means in a reasonable amount of time. And so that's how we know, even without having run it, that it's possible to run a theoretical algorithm on a theoretical quantum computer to solve a real world problem. Maybe in another episode, we can dive into the methodologies as to how we're approaching solving this problem for ourselves. So we need to move away from the discrete log as a trapdoor function and move to something else. And as folks will know, we already have part of that story done on the Algorand blockchain. We're using state proofs to secure the history of the blockchain, so all the blocks that have been created so far, from quantum attacks, using lattices, which are a trapdoor function that are quantum resistant. And so we'll get into more of that, I hope, in another show. But it's a very interesting area of research and development within the cryptocurrency industry.
Super cool.
And John, like we're leading this, right, amongst all other blockchains out there.
Right. In terms of production, you're right, Min. In terms of production engineering, as in blockchains that are not just chat, but are in fact doing it, there's very few because, post-quantum cryptography, the type of crypto that defends against the types of machines that Marc's daughter is building, it's kind of the bleeding edge of mathematics. It's the very, very, it's the state of the art in terms of cryptography. And so it's hard. People don't fully understand it. There's not a lot of experts on it globally, and so the fact that we've deployed this in production in mainnet is actually quite something. There's still work to do, though. We need to move to a quantum resistant signature scheme for accounts, and indeed we need to implement and research a post-quantum VRF. So we need to change consensus to use a post-quantum or quantum resistant verifiable random function in order to be completely secure.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So that question kind of made, as you were talking about it, it kind of sparked this question that I'm seeing here, which I think maybe all of us can answer. Do you believe in from Trillion.algo, do you believe in a multi-chain future? Because I think this question of like quantum, us leading the pack, but really do we need to work with other chains, is a good one for us to think about. Maybe, Marc, what do you think?
Well, I think ultimately, yes, there will be a multi-chain future in my perspective. I don't think this is a winner-takes-all type of environment. I think there's going to be multiple blockchains. Each one's going to be specialized in their own kind of use cases. And for me, the critical thing to make this work, we don't want this to be kind of balkanized in a way that these lines between blockchains become visible lines to users and consumers, because when that happens, the whole thing just won't scale. And so to me, the critical thing is, given the reality of multiple blockchains, how do we architect it in such a way that the user experience doesn't suffer from it? And so what can we do to abstract the complexities underneath to make sure that that's invisible to the regular user? And that to me is the key challenge that from a technology perspective, I think needs to, and from a user experience perspective, will need to get solved. And bridges, of course, play a role into that, but maybe dApps that run on multiple blockchains play a role into that. And so there's I think that to me feels like the critical thing that needs to get solved to be able to handle the situation.
Yeah.
And also, but the other thing is like the other complexity, of course, is not just the multi-chain environment, but the layer ones and the layer twos and the layer threes, and so. What I like about what we do is that a lot of the functionality is really built into kind of layer one. So there's really no need for all the rollups. And I was listening to a podcast recently, and they were talking about rollups, and they were talking about rollups of rollups. And it's like, what is this? It's like creating band-aids and then creating band-aids on top of band-aids, and let's celebrate the band-aids. It's like, why? It makes no sense to me. Anyways,
rollups for your roll. If you're using rollups for your rollup, you're doing it wrong.
There's also layer 3s coming, so we better get ready for that 5th one,
Yeah, layer 4. I'm on layer 4 right now.
I'm on the 5th.
For me, Min, I think it's important. I think I like the operating system analogy. I'll keep it short. Mac OS talks to Linux. Linux talks to Windows. You can send an email from Linux to Windows. You can play games cross-platform. I think operating systems need to talk to each other. So I think these chains need to talk to each other. And I would say, which is one further step, which is that these chains are silos of liquidity, and those liquidity pools need to be bridged to each other to the way we bridge more traditional liquidity pools and social networks. So yeah, I'm a proponent of multi-chain.
I didn't realize this was going to be a unanimous answer, because sounds like we're all embracing multi-chain. The thing that I'd add to this is, like, I also agree with you guys 100%. And I also think that in a multi-chain world where it's about the use cases, right? That's how we're going to get adoption. So in a multi-chain world, when you have somebody using with the user experience being better, using a particular solution that is built on a blockchain, they're not going to care what it's going to be built on, but the developers will care, and the developers will go after the tech that best services that use case, right? So I sort of think that the best tech is really going to is just really going to shine in a multi-chain world. And in that sense, I feel like we're in a very nice position for sure. Totally. All right, let's maybe wrap with one last question, which I think is pretty critical here. Marc, Liquor ASA says, "We will send a beer to you. What's your favorite beer? Oh, favorite liquor?"
Okay, obviously I'm Belgian, so I'm speaking from authority, and to say that, of course, beer has to be my favorite drink. And if you ask me my favorite beer, it would have to be a beer called West Vleteren. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. It's a Trappist beer. It's a monk's beer, and you can't buy it anywhere. The only way to get it is you have to drive to West Vleteren and go pick it up. That's the only way you can buy that beer, and obviously it's the best beer in the world.
I can't even say that word,
Vleteren.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I mean, you do live in the Bay Area. We do have some pretty good breweries out here. I'm a little bit, I don't know.
What's your favorite? What's your favorite?
I like Fieldworks, and they have now expanded into the peninsula. Have you ever been to the Fieldwork?
No.
Oh, welcome.
No.
You guys should all come to the Bay Area. We'll go to Fieldwork. We'll work there. We'll do field working.
I want to go. I spent a little bit of time in Belgium before because it's a cheap and cheerful holiday from Ireland, and so I visited quite a lot of these monasteries, the Trappist places, but I'm a big fan of goose. I like the lambic goose. So there's a one place called Boone Goose, and they have this particular one. If you can find it, it's Mariage Parfait, if I'm even pronouncing that correctly. But they have this spontaneous fermentation where they throw like the Belgian summer flora into a tank, and it just makes this incredibly natural, bitter, or maybe not bitter, but very interesting
sour. It's a bit of a sour taste, right?
Sour beer.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's really nice. But the other thing that's happening is that lately I've been actually trying a lot of like non-alcoholic beers, and they've come a long way. I find they've come. I know a lot of people are going to get really upset with me now saying that, but actually, I think a lot of the non-alcoholic beers have come a long way as well.
And tasty,
yeah. Like Leffe, I'm not sure if you know Leffe, another Belgian beer. They have a non-alcoholic version that is really, really good. So yeah,
non-alcoholic beer is actually illegal in Ireland, so we can't get it here. Not really. Okay, so what's next on the agenda? I think we probably have to quickly just maybe give people a glimpse into what's coming up show-wise for the next few weeks, what they can look forward to on Verifiably Random. Min, do you want to take me through it?
Yeah. Well, I think a couple things. We'll kind of be dropping these episodes every 2 weeks. This format, the three of us, we're going to be hosting, and there may or may not be a guest. We'll keep you guessing. And then, you guys, we have a couple of topics that we've kind of been thinking about. I'm personally super excited about this AI topic that we've been kind of throwing ideas around. John, I know you've got some exciting things there to say as well. What are you guys excited about?
So I would like to look at some, of course, because I'm a geek, the technicals. So I'd like to dive into the items on our roadmap as we progress through them over the next few months. I'd like to talk about post-quantum as well, go a bit deeper into that. And I'm very excited about some of the guests that we're going to be having on, because I think some of them will have a lot of insight, and hopefully...
No spilling.
How about you, Marc?
I'm actually very excited about talking about use cases that uniquely need blockchains. It's like so think about like public good, for instance. Like there's a lot of use cases there. Um, Web3, a lot of use cases about like real ownership and moving the world from walled gardens to a world where people can have creators, where publishers, where everybody can have real ownership over their accounts and their followers. So I really like to focus on use cases that uniquely need blockchain to really blossom.
I think Mark, I love that because I think that on the one hand really shines a light on kind of the projects that are building, but I think it'd be also fun to dig into what's working and what's not. Like a lot of these use cases are such good ideas, but executing it and getting the right users and getting the right product out there is so hard. So I think we should also have some of these like tough conversations about why certain use cases just aren't getting traction. Don't you think?
Right.
Yeah, and I'm a firm believer that blockchain is not a solution to all problems. I
Yes.
think I
Mhm.
think that's and so people that kind of overhype these blockchains as being it's going to take over the world and it's going to do everything for everybody. I don't think is the right way to look at this. I think blockchain is a technology, is a computing paradigm like another, and it has its use cases and it's used for certain things. It's really good at certain things. It's really bad at other things. And so let's focus on the things that it's good at, and let's get more developers working on the use cases that we know uniquely need blockchain technology to be able to thrive.
Absolutely agree. I think it's so important to be authentic about this stuff. And you're right. There are use cases that just sing on blockchain and can't be achieved elsewhere. But quite clearly, sometimes people try to, just like AI, shoehorn everything into a single product.
So it feels like we're going to have a lot to talk about.
Yes.
Yes. And in fact, this is a good part for me to say, let's please subscribe to season 1 of Verifiably Random. And we are excited to bring more of these conversations to you in the next couple of weeks. Thank you all for listening. Maybe we'll do a quick goodbye.
See you, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
See you next round. Thank you.